All right, to get started, we're going to cut 50 inches of beading thread. So a little under your wingspan. My wingspan is, going to give me about 60 inches or so. So I just cut a little less than that. And start by threading a needle onto one side. And what we're going to do is we're going to work the lantern pattern from the widest row out. And what I mean by that is, in this case of this pattern, the widest row is also the very center row, which makes it really handy to keep track of where we are. This is a nice beginner-friendly pattern. Once you've got your needle threaded, just fold over some of that length so that you have something to hold on to. And pick up the first 3 beads in the pattern row. And so how that looks is, this is the widest row of the pattern. I just covered that up with my ruler. And this is the row above it. And so what we're going to do is just string these in single column peyote by starting with the A bead, A bead, A bead. Go back through this A bead. And then from there on, we'll carry on with pick up an A, go through the A. Pick up an A, go through the A. All the way until we get to the end. All right, and so to start, you just need those 3 beads. And bring that to kind of the middle of your thread. We're going to use the length left at the beginning, which is about half the length we cut, as leaving a long tail so that we can work the bottom half of the pattern without having to add thread. And go back through the first bead that we strung in this step. And pull tight, and you'll get this little peyote stitch pop. So each bead we add from here out is going to go into the up bead. So the up bead we're going into next is this one right here. And then we just keep going. And the total I'm going for, just looking at the pattern here off camera, is a total of 11 beads, and that's counting the top and the bottom row. So that's just counting how many white beads I'm going to pick up and add. So far I've got 5, see? There's number 6. And what I'm doing to keep my tension good on the start is I just pinch all that work in my hand. And you can still see the bead you want to get into by doing that, but it just makes it a lot easier to keep your work tight. So there's our 7 beads, right? And again, I'm just pinching it, but I can still see that bead I want to go into. So pull through that. And I'm going to just tighten that up just a little bit. We want to keep this row as tight as we can. There's 8. Or these rows, I should say. Because this is building 2 rows at once, which is really a nice little jump ahead start. All right. And so this is going to be bead number 11. Let's take a look at where we are in the pattern. We should have 6 on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 5 on the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so now we're going to switch to color C. And again, I'm just following the pattern here off camera. There's 1, 2, and 3 color C. And mine's a little loose looking. About every 4 beads or so, even with doing that little pinch method, it still kind of loosens up. But you can just take your thumbnail, just kind of hold the beads in place. Just pull to tighten. And it does have some ability to tighten the work even a little bit back. So a little bit better. I'm going to carry on by adding another 11 white beads, color A. per the pattern. So there's 1, and here's 2. There's 3. 4, 5, and here's number 6. So each time we're changing direction. Here's 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So there's the widest row and the row above it completed. And what we're going to do next, before we start brick stitching, 2 things. One, I want to start here on the working side, and I want to weave it around to reinforce this edge. That's something I want to do just to make sure that this edge bead is nice and secure. It's going to be the point where we suspend the earring. So just thinking ahead to that spot, it can make sense to kind of do that work now. It's the easiest time to do it because we're able to get there with the least amount of moves and being able to kind of see where we are. So I'm going to head down through this bead that's next to the one that I'm exiting. And from here, go through the 3rd bead in the bottom row. So the 3rd bead in, 1, 2, 3. So just down through that one. We're just making it so we can turn around. And up through here. And then one more. I just want to get up through that edge bead. This is the one we were exiting when we started this turn. The whole point of that was just to strengthen that edge. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. But in this case, I'm going to try to bring this thread exiting from this bead down here, because we're going to build brick stitch off of this end using the long tail that we just left at the start. So let's go ahead and thread a needle onto the tail. All right, I've got a needle on the tail thread. And really similarly to how we did the other side, in this case, we're just going to go down through the adjacent bead to the one we're exiting, pull that through, continue down through what is the 3rd bead in from the edge, up through the adjacent, and this time we'll make a turn and we will head down through this edge bead right here. And so nothing else to do now with this side. We're gonna work this side after we finish the top here. So, but if you want to leave your needle on there and just kind of put it out of the way, you can do that. And now I'm going to head back over to this side and start with the brick stitch row. So the next row up from the one where we are right now, it needs to start with 4 color A. I'm going to pick up the first 2 of those, and I'm going to go under the 2nd thread bridge. So that is this one right here. And pull that through, and you'll get the 2 beads sitting next to each other, kind of a little bit, diagonal. And then come up through, come back up through the 2nd bead. And pull tight. And what you'll get is something that looks a little bit like that. And we can make that better. We can make that sit exactly side by side by going back through the 1st bead. So that's this one right here. Pull down. And try to get your needle underneath the first thread bridge now. So that's the one that's running above those two edge beads on that row. You can see I've been able to get my needle just under that. Keep going, pull that through. And then go back up through that second bead. So that one right there. And then when you tighten it, it should put those beads side by side a lot better than they were. And another thing you can do, if you've tightened it really well, is take the beads in between your thumb and finger and spin them. What I mean by that is, so kind of pinch them like this and do this little roll thing. It makes that thread hide, because before it was really kind of sticking out a little bit, and that helps a lot with getting it to stay in place. All right, so we're just going to finish the rest of that row. I'm going to flip my work to work from this side to that side. And in this pattern, we can do that. It's a symmetrical pattern. So nice and handy. It's symmetrical from left to right, and then also from top to bottom. So that's going to make our job easy following this pattern. So I picked up another bead. Now for the rest of the row, it's 2 beads to start every row. And then each subsequent bead in the row, you're just going to pick up 1. So here's 1 bead. I went under the 3rd thread bridge, pull tight, come back up through the bead. Be careful not to puncture your thread if you can. Make sure it's moving freely. Mine's not. There we go. And here's the next bead that we need to add. I'm under the 4th thread bridge with the 4th bead. Nice and easy to remember. There we go. So the pattern now wants me to add a color C. So we'll pick up color C, go under the next thread bridge, and pull tight. Come back up to the bead, and it should pop right into place. Now we need to add color B, which is this gorgeous cobalt blue. And back to C. So I'm just picking up the bead, going under the next thread bridge, pulling it all the way through, and then heading back up through the bead. And again, I'm still trying to be careful if I can not to puncture my thread when I'm going back through the bead. It's kind of easy to do, so you just gotta watch for it. There we go. So let's get 4 more. Here's 1. And 2. The rest of this row is all color A. Here's the next one. And last but not least, we have 1 more color A. Go under the thread bridge here. Up through the bead. And just trying not to puncture that thread. And there we go. So that was the first row of brick stitch. And the cool thing about this pattern is every subsequent row, all the way up to the finish top part, is an irregular decrease row, meaning you'll start with 2 beads like we did here, go under the 2nd thread bridge, come up through that 2nd bead, straighten it out if you'd like, by going back to the 1st, under the 1st thread bridge, back up to the 2nd bead, and then 1 for 1, add a bead to every thread bridge through the end of the row in accordance with the pattern. And when you do that, you'll reach a spot where, let me show you where I'm at on this other one here. I have a sample I worked ahead. It just carries on from there. And so that's the goal. You want to work to that point. I'm going to set this one aside for a moment and switch to this one so I can show you where to go from here. In this case, we just have one row left to do, and that is a row of all B here at the top. So let's do that together really quick. And then we'll switch back to the tail and finish the rest of the pattern down there. So here's our first 2 color B. And we're going to go onto the second thread bridge here. Come up through the second bead. Pull tight. And again, you'll get that little cattywampus thing. So come down through. And go back through the first bead. And I like to do this in one swoop. I'll go back through that first bead and get under that first thread bridge. You're kind of in the same journey there. Pull tight. And then head right back up to that second bead. And again, you got this thing where you can kind of see the thread a little bit. The way to fix that is to get your thumb above. First tighten. That often does it by itself, but just in case you need another method, you can spin them in your fingers. And that settles all the thread from that step. That turning step sometimes just creates a little bulk under the bead. It's easy to get rid of though, if you just do those 2 little tricks. And the rest of it's smooth sailing. We just pick up 1 bead, next thread bridge, and we just finish that right to the edge here. Right there till the end of the row. All right, so on this side, we're done. We can weave in our thread. So I'm going to show that now with the working side before we switch back to the tail side. To weave in this working side, all you got to do is just go back through a bead. Just go back through the one that's next to the one you're exiting. And then just in any way that is comfortable for you to maneuver, just start going through a few beads. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can get through a couple, like I just did there. And just start pulling your thread through. And I'm going to head down a few more. Let's see where I'm at. Got through 2 more here. And now I'm going to make a turn. So when I say make a turn, what I mean is you can pick the bead that's next to the one that you're currently exiting, either this way or that way. Head through this one. And what you'll get is you see the little tiny little bit of thread there. Again, you just want to spin that, pull tight and spin. Just to make sure it hides, it's hidden there pretty well. And then head back through the bead again. And there's a turn. I'm going to spin again and pull tight. Okay, so it's nice and hidden. Carry on through a few more beads. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of an audible reassurance when you pull through if you listen. It's hard to hear, but you can hear the thread kind of click as it just goes right in between the beads like floss. And from there, I would just trim it. We're about to build the bottom half with the other strand of thread. So just push down, pull up. If you weren't sure you have enough thread, you can always hang on to the remainder of that before trimming it. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have enough with what I've got here. But sometimes if you didn't measure right in the beginning, you can always save it. There's always a way to weave down to where you need to be and start stitching. Okay, so from here, you'll want to take back a look at the pattern and you'll want to flip it upside down and work back from the widest row. So we built the widest row in step 1, and that was this one right here. And so lucky for us, the whole pattern's symmetrical. So working back from there, you just flip it over and start adding the next row of beads. All right, so finished right to the end, and it looks really cool. So there's our first lantern. So we just need to weave in this side, and I'm gonna do the same thing that I did on the last side over here, where I'm just gonna go back through a bead, and we'll just weave through a few beads, change direction one time, and trim it. There we go. I wove around. I changed direction once by making a loop, so I went down, up, down, did some more zigzag in here, and now I'm just gonna trim that really quick. So I'm gonna push down with the scissors, pull up with the thread, and should have that end pop in there. Make sure that's all good. All right, let's finish this. We're gonna need the findings packet from your kit, and you're also gonna need a pair of chain nose and bent nose pliers. Let me show you those really quick. Chain nose come in a bunch of varieties. You can get regular chain nose. These are called square chain nose, and although not required, they're what I'm using today. They're really nice for jump rings. And then I'm also going to use a pair of bent nose, and that's just another little nice to have for jump rings. So however you like to do opening and closing your jump rings, that'll work fine for you here. All right, so once you've got your thread woven in and it's all finished, the next step we're going to want to do involves getting out some of the findings. So you're going to need an ear wire, 2 of the chains, one of these decorative little lentil assemblies, which is just a lentil with a little link to it, attaching to another one. And then there is 2 jump rings. You're going to want 2 of these little 4mm jump rings. They might even be 3mm. They're somewhere around there, but they're really tiny. So get those, and then we'll do some assembly. All right, so you want to pick up one of those little jump rings and find the seam on it. And mine's right there at the top. Pinch one side, open up that jump ring by using your chain nose and bent nose pliers that I've got working with here. Just kind of do a lateral motion to get that open. And try to make that wide enough that you can get a bead into it. We're going to try to slide this through a bead. All right, and then just go look at the side here. Do you see the very tip white bead? Very gently, don't insist on it. You don't want to break a bead. We're going to very gently try to get this through. And just a couple of tips is if it's not immediately working for you, sometimes it's because you're using a side of the jump ring that is thicker than the other. For some reason, one side ends up a little thicker than the other when you cut them. So you just want to just try to work that down into the bead. Go really slowly, work gently. And a better motion to use is this kind of like spin. See how I'm kind of working it with a little bit of a wiggle rather than forcing it. This is a little delicate, to do, but it does work. And once you get that through, let me show you up close. We're just going to close that jump ring now. I'm going to make sure I got that nice and closed. There we go. And so we're going to do a little bit of an assembly here for the bottom half. So that's the top where I'll put my ear wire. Here at the bottom, what I'm going to do is start with, forgive me there, a little fuzz. Start with one of those jump rings, open it up, and start by putting on one chain. So just like that. And this one we're going to very gently work into the bottom. Same spot as we did here at the top. We're just going to use the bottom bead. And again, what you want to do is just very gently, without insisting on it, test the waters. See if that's the right side of the jump ring to be using. There will be one side of the jump ring that's got a little burr on it, because when you cut the metal, one side's flush and one side typically isn't. And so If it doesn't just immediately go through for you smoothly like that, don't force. Just stop and adjust everything until you get it. Another reason sometimes if your jump ring isn't going through, like I struggled a little on that side, it can also be because the jump ring is encountering thread as it's going through the bead. You want to just wiggle that, maybe take the jump ring back out and try again. And if all else fails, you can try to just do a stitched version to attach it, but so far I've had pretty good luck getting these to go, but you can just stitch straight through the jump ring when you're, finishing the earring itself if that's easier for you. Great. So that's all you need to do as far as like working it into the bead. So the hard part is done. The next thing we want to do is get one more jump ring. And sorry, I should have said 3 instead of 2. Just going to find one over here. And go ahead and do the same thing we did before. You want to open up that jump ring. And this time, attach the lentil, the chain, and the lentil has a little hole at the top, see there? And then go ahead and bring that on the bottom jump ring. So there you go. All set there. And then this is just kind of like an artistic splash. You can always adjust this to be different and to your liking if you would like to. Here on the ear wire, there's a seam. The seam is always going to be on the side of where the ear wire is pointing this way. So we're just going to open that up. And we'll pop that right here on the front of the top of the earring. Finding my words today is hard. There we go. And then go ahead and close that. You can slide the little bead down that covers up the seam on your ear wire. And there you go. So that's the lantern earring. All ready to go. And if you want to try other decorative ideas down here at the bottom, feel free to do that. This is all to your liking. You can always put less chain, more chain. You can change the length of the chain, all that kind of stuff. I might play with that a little bit on further designs. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and be sure to check out our other earring kits. Happy beading, guys!